I'm Logan Crawford, and right now on the Spotlight Network, we're diving into a powerful book. It is called Better Place. It is an unforgettable story written by a terrific author by the name of Bruce Blizard. It is captivating readers and climbing the charts. This emotionally gripping story blends coming-of-age drama with heartland realism, inspired by the author's own life in rural Washington. If you love powerful storytelling, strong characters, and heartfelt lessons, this one's for you. We're delighted to have this very talented author join us here today on Spotlight. We thank the team at Sweet Spired Literature Management for helping us put him in the spotlight today. And we ask viewers like you to support authors like him by subscribing to our channel and by purchasing his amazing book. The links are below this interview. And be sure to download the Spotlight Network TV app streaming on Roku, Amazon Fire TV, and Apple TV. Bruce, thank you so much for joining us here today on Spotlight.
Well, thanks for having me.
Tell us a little bit about how your own personal experiences in Washington State inspired this story.
I went to a very small high school, and my first teaching job back in 1989 was at a very, very small high school. In fact, in the community where the book takes place. I think there's a different atmosphere, a different point of view, a different way of thinking about community life in schools, particularly that exists in very small towns than it would be in larger cities or even medium-sized communities. They tend to be very, very tight-knit. Everybody kind of knows what's going on. People are very concerned about each other and about each other's kids for the most part. And I think growing up in that environment and then having a teaching experience in that environment in a very remote community here in southeastern Washington had a lot to do with the direction the story took once I got it moving.
Absolutely, absolutely. You have a background as a coach and a teacher as well. Did that shape the story?
Absolutely. I taught for 23 years, 2 years in the small town of Pomeroy, Washington, where the story takes place. And for the last number of years, or until about 2012, at Richland High School, which is a much larger school in a relatively small community, about 100 miles west of Pomeroy. In that process, I've sort of formed some pretty, I don't want to say controversial, let's say unique attitudes about education and what should be done as far as education is concerned. Pomeroy High School was a school that when I was there had 106 kids in it in the entire school. I think it's smaller than that now. Education it can be approached differently in those places than it can in a larger comprehensive high school. Like Richland High School, where I coach now and previously taught, there's about 2,500 kids in that school, which is more people than lived in Garfield County when I was there, which is where Pomeroy is, about 2,000 people in Garfield County. So I think that being able to see the contrast of the way education can be approached in a small school and a larger school colored my attitude about how public education should be done. With that said, my conclusion is that it's largely being done incorrectly in terms of the idea that it doesn't really serve the needs of most kids. And I think that's sort of infused in this book and in a couple of my other books. And I want to be clear that when I say that, I'm not suggesting that public education is a failure. I'm saying that it could be done differently and more effectively, I think.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And too many kids are left behind because the model of teaching doesn't really fit what they need. Let's talk a little bit about the story. Give the folks at home an overview of A Better Place.
Better Place is the story of a young girl about 12 years old. Her name is June. She lives with her family in a very, very remote corner of the state of Washington, in the southern part of Garfield County, which is in the extreme southeastern corner of the state. She is brilliant. She has an intellectual gift that makes her precocious. She's a little bit outside the mainstream in terms of her intellectual ability. Her mother has made sure that intellectual ability that she has been fed. Her mother is also comes from an academic background that she sort of turned her back on. They are living a very remote life on a ranch, in, as I said, in southern southeastern corner of Washington. But suddenly, the state decides that this girl needs to be in public school, and the mother is completely opposed to that idea. When a state official shows up to find out whether or not she's being taken care of and whether or not the home environment in this remote location is really healthy for her, a conflict develops between the family and the state official. And ultimately, after a series of events, the girl and her father are forced to flee into the Blue Mountains, which is into Washington and Oregon. At that point, we sort of jump back in time because they flee on horseback. And now we've moved this girl from a contemporary setting into a very primitive setting. And then the story kind of develops from there as the girl and her father are attempting to separate themselves further from state authority, I guess, for lack of a better term.
Very cool. Such an imaginative story and very cinematic. Have you envisioned this as a movie?
I think everything that I write is that way. I think that's sort of, I don't know if it's a trend. I don't follow that many other authors that closely, but I think people my age, we grew up with TV and with cinema. And I think our natural way of thinking about stories is in that sort of episodic, you know, step-by-step sort of method of storytelling that you get in cinema. I didn't have that specifically in mind. I think that's just the way I think about stories.
Yeah, very visual, and it makes it very, very compelling. And of course, if it does become a movie, you've done the hard work first, which is put the story out there. So hopefully somebody looks at it and decides they want to bring it to a different or a broader audience. And I think that would be wonderful, no doubt. How does this book compare to your previous books, God's Instant and Dark Canyons?
Well, Dark Canyons is the original title of A Better Place. The people I was working with then liked that title. I didn't. So when I republished the book a few years later, I changed the name back to what its original title was. I think there are thematic elements that are consistent in all of my books, at least in the 3 novels that I've got currently published. There's always a very subtle but very important Christian element to the books. They're not Christian fiction in the way people would think of Christian fiction as a genre, but they're Christian fiction in the sense that there is always at least one character who's nudging the main character in that direction. In this case, it's the girl's mother. In God's instance, it's an older couple, particularly an older woman, that are trying to sort of help 2 young people get their lives together. The Christian elements are not necessarily overt throughout the book, but it seems like there's always an instance in the book when that sort of enters in a more overt manner. All of that book so far take place in very small rural environments, partly because that's where I live, partly because that's where I grew up, partly because I think that there's something to be gained by separating the story from the larger culture. I think that A Better Place, particularly, like I said, it's in the most remote section of one of the most remote sections of Washington State. And I think things can develop in a setting like that in a different way. The story can take a different direction than it would in a larger city like Seattle. June's story in A Better Place would be much different were she in Seattle. But the fact that the family is so remote gives them an opportunity to sort of live their family life on their own terms without any sort of interference or even observation until a state official makes an overt attempt to insert herself into the life of the family.
Yeah, absolutely. Before we leave you today, let me ask you this. What do you hope readers take away from the book?
I think there's a couple of things. Number one is that in all my books, one of the things that I really admire about good young adult fiction is that the authors take their characters seriously and they take their readers seriously. These are, I guess, technically young adult books, but I think adults also find them interesting. I think you have to recognize that young people, teenagers, young adults, are much more complex in the way that they view their life than we sometimes think they are. We think in terms of, okay, the kids, we think in a certain way about teens, and I think that's a mistake. I think they're complex individuals. I think they are affected by a set of complex factors in their own life. And I would hope that people recognize that when you see a young person, that you're only seeing the surface, that there's a lot more going on in the life of a young person than we sometimes consider.
Absolutely, completely on target, no doubt. This book is wonderful, folks. You will absolutely love it. It is an amazing book, folks. The name of the book is A Better Place. It's an unforgettable story that's captivating readers and climbing the charts. This emotional, gripping novel blends coming-of-age drama with heartland realism inspired by the author's own life in rural Washington. If you love powerful storytelling and strong characters and heartfelt lessons as well, this book is for you. The links are below this interview. Bruce, thank you so much for joining me here today on Spotlight.
Good. I appreciate you taking the time to talk to me. Thank you very much.
I appreciate your time, your insight, and to the folks at home, I'm Logan Crawford, thanking you for your time this time. Until next time on Spotlight.